If you're a Cleveland Browns fan looking for a break from the emotional roller coaster that is the price we pay from loving then hating our Browns, then a big welcome to Cleveland Browns Anonymous, a group therapy podcast to help you survive the season. So let's start our meeting.
Hi, everybody. We got a special guest, tennis legend at the Cleveland Skating Club, John Schloss, otherwise known as Lobs. John, how you doing?
I'm doing well, Mike. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Well, come on. We got a lot of catch up to do. We're going to do a two-parter. We haven't had a podcast in a couple months. We've been waiting for the free agent signing, the draft, the OTA. So we got a lot of to digest now. What are your just overall thoughts of what the Browns have done off season, and what do you think is going to happen going forward this season?
Well, we've been down this path before where they've made changes and there's huge optimism, but it hasn't worked out. So I was going to ask you, I need some guidance. How, as a Browns fan, should I feel? They've made a lot of moves. It seems like things have gotten better on both sides of the ball and special teams. So I'm excited, but I've got to be cautious too.
Yeah. Well, let me flip me the ball. Let me run with it a little, to use a football expression. I think, I keep reminding myself and Browns fans, insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and thinking things are going to change. So we start from that premise, like what have the Browns done differently? And so that there'll be a different result. I think the first very encouraging sign is that nobody's hyping the Browns. They are way under the radar here. It's very similar to the Philadelphia Eagles. 2 years ago, they were in the playoffs. They were competitive, but Hurts was definitely raw, and it showed in the playoffs. And then they made a few tweaks, they made a few changes, and they came out of nowhere, and they were undefeated, I think, for like 8-9 games, and they just were blowing people out. I think the Browns are going to have a very good, surprising season to a lot of pundits. And the reason is coaching. If they had a different defensive coordinator and a different special teams coach last year with the same team, they would have been in the playoffs. I mean, special teams cost us a couple games. Of course, the defense was pathetic again, going on 2-3 years, more broken coverages, of course, the Jets game. So they have looked at coaching finally as a key, and not just draft and signing and free agency and stuff like that. They realize that coaching is as important as who they're drafting and who they're signing and what their cap space is. It's not just the quarterback. Quarterback obviously is important. You've got to have good players. But at the end of the day, what's the point of having good players if you have bad coaching? Your thoughts?
Totally agree. I mean, I think they upgraded in both defense and special teams on the coaching front. So I think that was pivotal. I also like the fact, so that's a big deal.
Well, and it's what I'm really encouraged about is the fact that coaching, the coaches we brought in, Schwartz especially, and who's our other guy on special teams? I keep forgetting his name.
Bubba
Ventrone. Bubba Ventrone. They have had input in the free agent signing and the draft, which when you think about, everybody, I don't want to keep, stomping on Joe Woods' grave, but Joe Woods, he wanted those big safeties. He wanted those safeties in the box. He wanted that. He didn't want, that the defensive line was almost an afterthought. And he was totally wrong. And so now you got Schwartz coming in, and all of a sudden they've remade the defensive line. They pretty much stand pat on the linebackers because everybody was bemoaning the linebackers. Well, what are you going to do if the defensive line is getting blown out of the water, leaving the linebackers constantly having to fill the holes that the defensive line's not filling? And so what does Schwartz do? Schwartz says, I want this guy, I want this guy. He gets Johnson. John Johnson goes, and he brings in his guy from Philly who knows the defense, kind of an Eric for those of a certain age, John. Remember when the Browns brought in Erich Barnes from the Giants?
I do.
Okay, well, that's who Schwartz brought in with that guy from Philly.
He got McLeod as this guy from Philly.
Coach on the field.
Yeah, it seems to me when you have a great defenses usually have their own quarterback, and that quarterback is usually in a safety in the defensive backfield. I think the McLeod signing, assuming he's on the same page with Schwartz, and then they added Thornhill, the veteran presence, I think that can make all the difference.
I'll tell you one thing, we're not going to see any more blown coverages. If I was a betting man, there was some Vegas lines that I could pick up, and I would say we're not going to see, remember those blown coverages? Not just the Jets game, but go back another year, the Chargers game. There must have been 3 touchdowns of 50-plus yards where a guy was wide open.
Right.
You look at the first game last year, Baker was on his heels. And all of a sudden, another blown coverage on a seam route. You're not going to see that with a Schwartz defense. But after a while, I mean, I've talked about this in past podcasts. You know, the Joe Must Go, part 1, part 2, part 3, part 4. I think Andrew Berry and Dee Podesta and the Brain Trust there said, wait a minute, we got to get a good coach here. We got to get a good coach who can input who they're picking up.
It was my impression that Stefanski was reluctant to make any changes in coaching personnel. So I think you're right. I imagine that it came from the other people in the executive suite.
Yeah, well, I think this is where Stefanski's been exposed with his I don't think he's a bad coach. I think he's a coach who's learning how to be a head coach, which is a whole different skill set. And I encourage everybody to read David Marinus's book, When Pride Mattered, The Life of Vince Lombardi, because Lombardi went through the same growth curve. He was an assistant coach with the Giants, and all you got to do is watch that HBO for the Cliff Note version of David Marinus's book. And he was, he was doing his rah-rah college shit. And Frank Gifford, Charlie Connerly, and the rest of the Giant veterans couldn't take it. And Lombardi, to his credit, went to those guys and said, what am I doing wrong? He knew he was doing something wrong. He wasn't able to communicate. Lombardi was the classic case of a guy who learned the psychological way of coaching up, getting the most out of his players. But that takes some seasoning. And I think Stefanski, like a lot of these coaches, where they're wedded on their schemes, their X's and O's, you could say the same thing about Joe Woods, Charlie Weiss, Romeo Crennel, Pat Shurmur, Norv Turner. These are all great guys great assistant coaches who crashed and burned as a head coach. And I think that's been the problem with the Browns the last couple of years. Barry and his crew are bringing in the talent. John Johnson was underused. You got to wonder, these new coaches, are they going to be more? I'm hoping they're going to be more like our offensive line coach, who's going to get the most out of his players, who's going to turn maybe a Jordan Elliott into a Wyatt Teller. You know what I'm saying? So
totally.
Back to you, John.
Hey, let's stop here We got to pay some bills. 30 seconds, and we'll be back. Getting your house ready to sell, or you just need some basic repairs, and you can't get anybody to come out or even return your phone call. Then call Riley Painting and Contracting, your home mechanics, for all of your home repair needs, from electrical, plumbing, roof repairs, and getting your house ready to sell. 45 years in the business, a AAA on the Better Business Bureau, and we're on the preferred contractor list in Cleveland Heights and Shaker Heights. You can contact us by calling 216-371-8160 and leave a message, and guess what? We'll call you back.
So I'm cautiously optimistic. I'm feeling good about the changes, both in coaching and players. What is there a certain? I'm going to throw it back at you, Mike. Is there a certain group that you're concerned about? For me, it's the linebackers, because you have a bunch of them coming off injury.
I think the linebacker. I'm looking to every layer of the Browns. Quarterback, Watson's going to have a good year. Okay, he's going to have he's got a full training camp. He's going to have a good to great year. I think he's going to be a top 5 quarterback. Look at the receiver core. I mean, they are loaded at receiver. Mm-hmm. Tight end, they got a nice mix of speed. I think Anthony Schwartz, he's history. David Bell, I think, all these guys. And they have these under the radar signings. That tight end who played with Deshaun, they brought in. The O-line, they beefed that up. They got that center from Ohio State. The O-line is solid. The running backs are solid. Then you go over the defense, and then look at the signing of Zadarius Smith. Oh, my God. Is Miles going to have a great year? They got 2 bona fide edge rushers now to go along with Miles. And they got that one guy, I forget his name, that nose tackle, defensive tackle. They're going to have a push up the middle. And that's going to make the linebackers, JOK. I mean, the linebackers are going to have a lot better year, because they're not going to be filling holes from the defensive line. And then, of course, you got our secondary. We're just loaded back there with talent. Number 1 picks, cornerback, stuff like that. So now you're going to have more press coverage to eliminate the dink and dunks. You're going to have more press coverage, and you're going to have a defensive line of 5 guys who's just going to turn the heat up. We got guys who can play man-to-man. You match man-to-man with a ferocious pass rush, you're talking top 5 defense. And then we got special teams with Bubba Ventrone, who all he did was turn around another failed Browns kicker, I forget his name, on the Colts. The guy had an all-pro year. So, I mean, hey, I'm trying to be cautiously optimistic, John, but at the end of the day, I'm thinking, boy, between Schwartz and Ventrone and the way they've drafted, if Stefanski can open up the playbook, I think the Browns are going to have a good year.
Let's hope so.
Yeah. So
I think the other thing is that, yes, Stefanski's on the clock. Stefanski's on the clock. So I think that's good. So they're going to be super motivated for a huge year, and that's only a good thing.
Yeah, well, I don't think Stefanski has any just glaring holes. He's emotionally, he's got the right comportment to be a head coach, and he's got the personality that can allow his coaches to do their job without getting his hands in. I wish he was had a little bit of injection of Bill Parcells, because every now and then you're getting a kick in an ass. The more I hear about what happened with Clowney last year, I'm like, where is the head coach? I mean, really, you got Joe Woods, who clearly is clueless. You got Stefanski bragging about, every other week it seems there's a players only meeting. And you got to ask yourself, there's more to being a head coach than X's and O's. Sometimes, I mean,
Right.
you got to ask yourself: would Lombardi put up with a Clowney? Would Parcells?
No.
Would Belichick? No way. And then I think when you say Stefanski's on the clock, I think that could be a factor. And I wish ownership would sit down with him and review his year and simply say, you should have done something about Clowney. You should have stepped in. You can't be saying week after week after week, I blew. It's on me. I got to coach better. You can't say that 5-6 weeks in a row, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, you just look like an idiot when you keep saying that. You know, it's like me as a contractor, or you as a stock picker. You keep picking losers, people are going to switch their broker, right?
Right.
So all right, John, who is enjoying life in Palm Beach, right? Are you near Mar-a-Lago?
Yes. Not
Okay.
far. Not far.
So final
Well,
thoughts, and we'll let you get back to the tennis court.
I'm going to say cautiously optimistic. I think we've covered a lot of ground, a lot of terrific changes. I am bullish. I'm psyched. I'm looking forward to this season. But given what we've been through as long-suffering Browns fans, I'm going to stick with cautiously optimistic going forward.
Okay, let's leave it at that.
Thanks for having me, Mike.
We'll pick it up after the first game, and
Okay.
coming up on part 2, Brooke Riley weighs in on the deep dive on the player acquisitions and the coaching. All right, John, enjoy the sun. We've got great sun here. We'll talk to you when you get back.
Thanks.
All right.
Talk to you later.
Okay.
Bye, Mike.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to the Cleveland Browns Anonymous podcast with Mike Riley. We have a lot more content on the way as we get this new podcast started. You can also check out some of our other podcasts like the Cleveland Real Estate Investor Podcast and other new ones that will start soon. On any platform that you find yourself listening to us on, feel free to leave us a like or comment or follow us. It always helps.